Welcome, everybody. It is so awesome to see this turnout. It's so awesome to see the weather we have been blessed with. Thank you for being here today for this Love Can Build a Bridge event. That is a call for love. It is a call for support. It is a call to action for our Black brothers and sisters in this community and across this nation. It is my honor to begin this with a prayer from Reverend Mindy Mays of Bethel AME Church in Noblesville.
Good evening, everybody, and just thank you for being here to show your support. Our opening prayer, an excerpt from the Black National Anthem. Let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. We pray for the day that Black lives and brown lives matter. We pray for the day of Amos 5:24, where justice rolls down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We pray these things and we pray equality for all. Amen.
I would like to, before we start, thank some people that without their support, this would not have been able to take place. My first thank you goes out to Cicero Chief of Police, Jim Hunter, Cicero Fire Chief, Steve Smith, Dr. Derek Airwood of Hamilton Heights, who is not with us today, but made sure and sent an email to every bus driver, janitor, teacher at Hamilton Heights, letting them know the support that he gives and encouraging the staff to be here, so I thank him for that. Justin and Katie Pollock of Cicero Christian Church for the sound system. They've been unbelievable. Dagny Zupin of Nickel Plate Express has been invaluable. Brett Morrow with his connections, he's kind of like, Cicero's Oprah. And the countless volunteers that in 8 days just came out of nowhere to put this together. And before we get to our speakers, kind of an intro of where I was when I got a phone call from Sabrina Duncan about this. This day is something that I've longed for now, going on 40 years. When I was 8 and in 2nd grade, I had a friend named Lisa, who I thought was one of the coolest kids around. She was funny, she was kind, she was great at kickball, and just someone I looked forward to playing with every day at recess. I knew she was different. I knew she didn't look like me, but I didn't care. Until the day I realized others did. It was just like any other day, but during recess, Lisa and I were confronted by 3 boys. They began calling Lisa a certain name I had not yet heard before and didn't understand yet. I didn't understand how awful this name was and what it represented. But Lisa knew. And as she stood there, I remember seeing the tears welling up in her eyes and her fists becoming clenched. As a friend, you'd think I would have stepped up and helped defend Lisa. But I didn't. Lisa, who was also tough, finally could take no more and punched the main bully in the nose. As with most bullies who get stood up to, he quickly ran away to play the victim to anyone who would listen. A teacher had Lisa and I stand against the school wall for the rest of recess as punishment. We both were silent, except for an occasional sob I could hear from Lisa. Things were never quite the same after that day. I mean, Lisa and I would still play together, but there was always this unspoken tension between us. We both knew I had failed her when she needed me most. Lisa moved away the next year. I never got the chance to say, I'm sorry. That was 40 years ago, and that day still haunts me. Lisa's probably forgotten all about it, because it's probably been replayed over and over various times in her life by various people playing the same roles. But today represents a chance for me to be part of something that I hope brings healing, love, and support to those in our community who have been waiting for it way too long. Today I promise I won't be silent. And now I would love to introduce our first speaker, Karen Henson.
It's a really big step. Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out today. My name is Karen Henson, and I have 8 children that have gone through Hamilton Heights school systems. My parents moved here in 1987, so lifelong residents, if you will. And I just want to share a little bit of our experiences that may not be what your experiences are. Goodbye. I love you. Be safe. Goodbye. I love you. Be safe. These are words I say every time my children leave the house. Behave yourself. Don't do anything you wouldn't do if I wasn't standing next to you. Make good decisions. We want our children to be safe. We want our children to come home. If you get pulled over by the police, call me immediately. Even if I don't answer, let it go to voicemail. Keep your hands on the steering wheel or on the dashboard. Do not make any moves unless you are instructed to do so. These things are as important to me to say to my black children as goodbye. I love you. Be safe. I have 8 beautiful black children. I want my children to know how truly beautiful they are. I need you to see how truly beautiful they are. I want my children to embrace being black. It's a beautiful thing to be. When you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you see your face. Your face identifies you as you. Your face identifies you to other people. I don't want you to be colorblind. I want you to see me and my babies for all that we are. I look in the mirror and I see my face. My children see their faces. We need you to see us. We need you to understand that white privilege is something that you may not even realize that you have. It's not something that you choose. It's something that just is. It's something given to you when you are born with a white face. Benjamin Franklin said, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are." I came here today with hope. Hope that someone will listen and really hear us. This will undoubtedly lead to some uncomfortable conversations, and that's okay. We need to embrace each other for our differences, not pretend like we are all the same, because we aren't. George Floyd was somebody's baby. Breonna Taylor was somebody's baby. Ahmaud Arbery was somebody's baby. Trayvon Martin was somebody's baby. They were all important to somebody. You've never cried because your child had a noose put in their locker in high school. You've never been heartbroken because your son, who wanted to take a girl out and impress her, and then when he went to walk her up to the door, had to stand next to the car because her grandparents didn't agree with interracial dating. You don't know the helpless feeling that you have when your child is on your front lawn and trucks drive past and say, "That ain't nothing but those nigger kids." And when you confront them and they look at you and you say, "Find something better to do on a Friday night," and they look at their clock and they look you dead in your face and say, "We got something better to do, but coon hunting don't start till midnight." Then when I threaten to call the police, they tell me, "Go ahead and call them. The police is my daddy." The thought that it could be my baby with a knee on their neck, calling for me, "Mama, I can't breathe." The thought that it could be my child pleading for their life. The it could be my child taken from me for no other reason than being black in America. We have to do better. We have to do better. This community has rallied together before. Why can't we do that now? Ignorance is no longer an acceptable excuse. The great Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Change can happen. Even if it's one person at a time, change can happen. Thank you.
The next group we're going to have, they're going to go one at a time. But as an educator, it does my heart good to see the youth, because things will change if the youth are willing to step up. And we have 5 unbelievably brave and bold youth that are ready to speak. It will start with Bree Henson. It will then go to Tillman Etchison. It will then go to Gus Etchison. It will go to JP Etchison, and end with Michaela Moran. So first up, Bree Henson.
Hello, I'm Bree Henson. I grew up in Cicero, graduated in 2016. My family and I first moved to Cicero in March of my 3rd grade year. I was eager to meet new friends, excited to have new teachers, and a new house in town. But it seemed like all that excitement of moving to a new home disappeared as fast as it came. One of my first year different experiences was around summertime going into 4th grade. There were those older guys that hung out over at Port Cicero, known in my house as the Diesel Boys. They drove past our house, revving their engines and yelling out, "Nigger." One night, my brothers and I were playing in our backyard, and a police officer pulls up. He accuses us of vandalizing the business that we lived next to. We were just black kids playing in our backyard. Moving to high school, there was one thing that'll always stick with me. I was sitting in class and someone had wrote KFC on the front whiteboard. Then another kid decided that he felt to turn KFC into KKK. I pointed it out to the teacher because obviously I was upset and it's not acceptable. And she takes the student out into the hall, and a few moments later, they return and she makes him apologize. I don't accept the apology, and she says he doesn't know any better. Longer story short, I got sent to the office because I wouldn't accept his apology. Being pulled over by the police is like a whole different Brianna shows up. Once I see those red and blue lights, or even just a cop behind me, I tense up. I could be doing nothing wrong whatsoever, but I still tense up. If I'm in a situation where I get pulled over, the first thing I do is call my mom. Once I have the phone ringing, I put the phone down so they don't think I was texting and driving. Then I leave my hands on the steering wheel and don't make any sudden movements. I listen to instructions, doing as the officer says, while feeling like my insides are hot, like they're burning, and feeling so shaky but yet so tense. Whether I'm in high school and being accused of being related to our black coach, and that's the reason for me to start a game or even get a lot of playing time, or I'm in my adult life and just in a gas station with my white boyfriend and get called a dirty butterscotch bitch, the feeling is always the same, full of rage, full of resentment, full of feelings that just don't go away. If I act out my feelings, I'll just be considered another loud, crazy black. But I'm just a black woman who's tired of seeing people look like her get killed. I have black older brothers and younger brothers. I have black younger... You got this! I have black older sisters and younger sisters. I have a black mother and I have a black father. I am black, and I want you to see my blackness. I want you to understand that there is a problem and that we need help to make a change. These are just a few of my stories, but they aren't unique. Many people who look like me have stories too. Thanks.
Tillman Etchison.
Love everyone. It is what Jesus preached, it is what MLK preached, and it is what George Floyd preached. 52 years ago, Robert Kennedy gave a speech and told protesters less than 30 miles from here the news of the assassination of Martin Luther King. It was an act of violence and hatred similar to the murder of George Floyd. What arose that night, however, was another movement that started with the peaceful, loving words. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or they be black. That was said by Robert Kennedy, the man who continued Martin Luther King's dream for love and equality before himself too was murdered. As you can see and hear, loving everyone and fighting for equality is not easy nor safe at times, but the opposition to not fighting and raising awareness would be to give in and continue to be okay with the quiet oppression and systemic racism people go through every day in this country. This fight will not be won with arson and looting, but with love, because war ends only when people love each other. Love is not riots with fires or policemen with tear gas and rubber bullets. That is not loving everyone. Loving everyone was seen in places like Flint, Michigan, Houston, Texas, and Trenton, New Jersey, where peaceful protesters were met not with force, but with understanding and empathy. Today it is clear more than ever there are two Americas, and we are more divided than ever. One America where people hate their fellow citizens based on their faith, skin color, and who they love. And the other side fighting for the end of this hatred. You are not born hating others, you are taught to hate others. If this hatred was never taught, and instead love for one another was the core of what all Americans stood for, there would finally be love and understanding. Understanding that shows people and opens the door to the facts that hundreds of years after slavery and decades after segregation, there is still an ongoing fight every day for not just equality, but for justice. For justice for people like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Gardner, and Tamir Rice. I can tell you, I understand that I will never understand. However, I stand in solidarity with every person here today and around the globe that are fighting for the same thing. Justice, equality, freedom, human rights, and most importantly, love. Thank you.
Now we have Gus Etchison.
Be kind. I read a quote once that said, "Imagine what 7 billion humans could accomplish by being kind and loving and respecting each other. Imagine if there was no hate, no bullying, no racism. We might not see this in our lifetime, but if we all work on ourselves and be that example you're looking for, and be there for everyone, just imagine. Imagine how the world would look with kindness as a language and not hate. What we need is to bring love and happiness to others. I know there are bad police officers, and this must change, and will change. Then we will not have to dream of a world where all police are kind, but it comes a reality where all law enforcement are empathetic and compassionate. Like the police officers who took knees with the protesters in solidarity. Kind, like the police officers who personally helped my family and held us tight when my father died. Choose to be change you want to see in the world. Do not wait on others to set the example. You be that example. Kindness and hatred are both like a virus. Now think which virus you would like to have. Treat everyone with the same amount of kindness you want to be treated with. Black or white, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together. Thank you.
now JP. Thanks, guys.
I'd like to thank everyone here for coming today. It is truly a testament to the character of this community. We are here today because there is a pandemic going on in this country. A pandemic of racism and hate that has been spreading and festering for hundreds of years. While we have made large strides as a society towards equality, the fight is far from over. The wheel of systemic racism for too long has crushed the souls of many Americans and denied them the promises that they were guaranteed. It is now on us, the people here and around the nation that support this movement, to pick up where past generations have left off, so that this generation and future ones may enjoy a society free of racism, oppression, and reach their full God-given potential regardless of their background. It's now time to break the wheel and create a new America. This change that we are working so hard to create will not be built in a day. It will be a process, but we cannot tire. We must be persistent. America is in crisis, and we must act now to fix it. The urgency of the situation requires it. We must all do our part to ensure that this America, this new America, is one that is free of hate and one that allows every single American to thrive. We will make this difference by doing a number of things. We have to hold our elected officials accountable for their actions and sometimes their inaction. We must voice our opinion and ensure that legislation and meaningful reform gets passed. And most importantly, we have to vote. I cannot stress the importance of this enough. All of our actions will mean nothing if we don't do this. It is the only way that we will make a difference in this country and make our voices heard. The events of the past few weeks have made me think of our Pledge of Allegiance that we repeated every single day in school. It ends with the line, "with liberty and justice for all." But these statements, however, seems like hollow words. We cannot say there is justice for everyone. Because of the systematic oppression many African Americans and minorities faced in this country. Where was the justice for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, for Tamir Rice, for Emmett Till, for the countless others who came before them and were denied the justice they so deserved? I believe in this country and I believe in this community, but I believe that most Americans are good, but we have to change. We must act now. We must end the disease of racism and systematic oppression in this country. It is on all of us to make sure that movement does not end once the protests have stopped and the world moves on. There must be justice for everyone in this country. Justice for George Floyd, justice for Breonna Taylor, justice for all. Thank you.
Michaela Moran.
As many of you know, my name is Michaela Moran. I'm a junior at Hamilton Heights, and I've been at Heights my entire school career. During my time here, I've made some great friends who love and support me unconditionally. I've also met some people who have made hateful comments because of the color of my skin. Some were so hurtful. When I was little, I wished that I were white, so the kids would just leave me alone. The latest incident just happened at the high school right before the school was shut down due to the virus. I was sitting in class, minding my own business, when someone decided to throw a conversation candy at me. When I picked it up, the heart said the N-word on it, as someone wrote it. Since I was the only person of color in the classroom, it was safe to bet that it was not a coincidence. I felt targeted. I cannot remember a time when I felt so unwanted in a room. I brought it to the teacher's attention, and she took immediate action involving the principals. For weeks, I repeatedly was pulled out of class, brought down to the office to retell my story. The culprits were finally found, and I was told they were going to be punished appropriately. But Mr. Mason couldn't tell me the punishment. I felt good about the situation and happy that it was finally resolved. That is, until I saw him roaming around the halls going to class like nothing ever happened, when he was supposedly in school suspension. Once again, my family felt the feeling as if the people in charge cared more about feelings of racists than they did ours. In my mind, I feel as if the whole incident was swept under the rug in hopes to say that it would all just go away. My story is not unique to one at Heights. There aren't many kids that look like me at Heights, but I promise you that they all have stories similar to me, including my brother's. It is time for administration to recognize that the children of color in the school system matter too. We want to feel the same and want it too. We shouldn't be made to feel like outsiders because our skin is darker than yours. It took me a long time to realize that my black is beautiful and I am exactly who and what God created me to be. So I will take that and move forward to be a champion for all the kids out there who feel that they were not welcome and wanted because of the color of their skin. I will continue to be friends to the people who feel they are friendless. I will continue to love everyone even when they don't love me back. I will continue to press forward and remind you every day that Black lives matter. Thank you.
Now Cicero resident and veteran, Cherry Moran.
I'm feeling a little weepy here, so please bear with me. When I was asked to speak to you today, I was really hesitant. Everyone wanted us to tell our collective stories because they needed to be heard in an effort to open a very necessary dialogue in our community. I have a lot of stories, and I wasn't sure which one I should tell you today. I need this brief moment that I have you all here captive to be as impactful and meaningful as possible. I could talk about all my interactions I've had with law enforcement. I've been either completely ignored or closely followed when I go certain places. And I could even tell you about how when I seek medical attention, I'm sent back home to die because my symptoms aren't taken seriously. I've got quite the list, and after 48 years it's long. But all those things can be easily dismissed, explained away by those who have no desire to truly see the problem that we have in our country. So the story that I chose to share with you today is not about me at all. Instead, I'm going to share with you the story of my child's first experience with racism in Cicero. And it happened here in a local church. So we moved here about 18 years ago from Houston, and I searched really hard to find a safe place to take my child. One thing that I think we can all agree on as parents is that we have the desire to keep our children safe. And I thought there could be no safer place in the church to take him for daycare. One morning during our drop-off routine, we were confronted by a little girl who was maybe 5 or 6 years old. She looked at Tyson, who was 4 at the time, and told him he was not allowed to sit beside her. Not because the seat was taken, not because it was defective, but because her daddy told her that black people are not as smart as white people, and that black people are bad, and she is supposed to stay away from black people. This child would greet us with her words of wisdom from her daddy every morning at drop-off. She seemed to not only wholeheartedly believe what she was saying, but she took joy in saying it. It was obvious the director of the daycare wasn't comfortable dealing with the issue. The resolution from her and the apology from the father seemed forced and hollow. Don't get me wrong, she did her best, but the entire experience confirmed what I already knew. Our feelings are not as important as those of a blatant racist. That man was so comfortable in his hate that he saw no fault in passing it on to his child. It's time for us to get uncomfortable. It is time for us to stand up. It is time for us to find a solution. We can no longer accept more of the same. And know that the problem of fixing racism and ending the hate is not one for people who look like me to fix alone. It's on you. It starts in your home. It starts with your babies. It is time to teach your children to be tolerant. Teach your children that we are committed to love one another as He loves us. Not just those who look like you, not just those who worship like you, and not those who love like you. All lives cannot matter until Black lives matter too. Thank you.
Pastor Terry Ditzler from Roots of Life Community in Noblesville. We're very honored to have her here today.
Good afternoon. I'm very proud of Cicero and Hamilton Heights School District to show up today. You see, I feel like Cicero is my community also. I raised a daughter that went to Hamilton Heights Elementary and then on to Walnut Grove Junior High. I was here when Ryan White was welcomed into this community. And it was here where I worshiped at Trinity United Methodist Church in Arcadia and learned the art of hospitality and community. So I know that this is a loving place. I know that you have it in you to be hospitable, to be loving, to be kind. You see, I was a single mother of a couple children here, and I was loved by so many community people. I learned how to love God in this community. And that's why I am here as a pastor of churches in this community, because I believe what the prophet said, Micah. O mortal, what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. You see, as a woman and as a polite citizen, we've been taught at a very early age not to speak out, not to stir the pot, just to let things be. When we see an injustice done, know that the leaders and the government will take care of it, because we elected them and we trust them to do the right things. Well, ladies and gentlemen and children, the time is now to maybe just ignore those old recordings that we've had. Maybe the time is now to listen to Scripture and to do justice and to love mercy and to speak out for those who we have hurt. My name is Terry Ditzler, pastor of Roots of Life Community Church in Noblesville, Indiana, and I am a recovering racist. I am learning so much. And like some of my white peers behind me said, it is going to be a lifetime of learning. And I know that I am not going to understand completely the plight and the hurt and the pain of my brown and black-skinned brothers and sisters. But I do feel their pain. When George Floyd called out for his mother, as a mother, I cried. As a mother, I cannot imagine seeing your child on the ground with a knee on the neck until death. As Christians, we are called, and Jesus would have us do what Jesus said to do, which was to love one another. And Jesus was always on the side of those who were oppressed. Jesus was always sitting with the sick, sitting with the poor, sitting with those who were lepers, sitting with those who were not in power, and telling them to rise up, to know that they are loved people of God. All means all, and Black Lives Matter. I've been reading a book called White Fragility, and I'd like to read just a little bit of an excerpt from it. Scholar Marilyn Fry uses the metaphor of a birdcage to describe the interlocking forces of oppression. If you stand close to a birdcage and press your face against the wires, your perception of the bars will disappear, and you will have an almost unobstructed view of the bird. If you turn your head to examine one wire of the cage closely, you will not be able to see the other wires. If your understanding of the cage is based on this myopic view, you may not understand why the bird doesn't just go around the single wire and fly away. You might even assume that the bird liked or chose this place in the cage. But if you step back and took a wider view, you would begin to see that the wires come together in an interlocking pattern, a pattern that works to hold the bird firmly in place. It now becomes clear that a network of systematically related barriers surround that bird. Taken individually, none of these barriers would be that difficult for the bird to get around, but because they interlock with each other, they thoroughly restrict the bird. While some birds may escape from the cage, most will not, and certainly that those that do escape will have to navigate many barriers that the birds outside the cage do not. The bird cage metaphor helps us to understand why racism can be so hard to see and recognize. We have a limited view. Without recognizing how our position in relation to the bird defines how much of the cage we can see, we only rely on single situations, exceptions, and anecdotal evidence for our understanding rather than on our broader interlocking patterns. Although there are always exceptions, the patterns are consistent and well documented. People of color are confined and shaped by forces and barriers that are not accidental, occasional, or avoidable. These forces are systematically related to each other in ways that restrict their movement. The church needs to speak out. Christians, people of God, we need to speak out against the sin of racism and all that comes with it. We have been taught to keep quiet. We have been taught to go with the flow. We have been taught to honor and respect our elected government officials. And what happens when we keep silent? The bullies win. The people who hold the power win and continue to tell the oppressed to shut the hell up. And we do. We give up. We give in. It's better to stay silent than to risk mockery and ridicule. But it is not the better way. It is not the way God intends for us to be. God intends for us to speak up against the sin of racism for all people.
Hey, 11 days ago, Sabrina Duncan gave me a call, and we talked for a couple hours because we were both from this community. I'm a lifelong member of this community, have taught in this community, and we both had this epiphany of we need to make a statement in this community. And so I had some say in, order of speakers. And why I put myself last, I have no idea, because that was a really bad mistake. I also kind of had the idea of the slogan that you've seen, hopefully on social media, things like that. Love can build a bridge. And I chose that for a reason. Because some of you may have asked, why a bridge? It's because this area, Cicero, Arcadia, Atlanta, we've created historic bridges before. In 1835, Robert Settlement, just outside of Arcadia, was a community of free black citizens who left North Carolina, Virginia, looking to make themselves a better life in a hostile world. Together with Quaker and Wesleyan settlements nearby, the Roberts community built a bridge that created safety, created a bridge of unity, and created a bridge to freedom, literally, as it is a known stop on the Underground Railroad. That was a historic bridge that was built in this area. There was another historic bridge, and I got to be personally involved. In 1987, I personally had the honor of being a part of another one. It was a bridge that connected a young man with AIDS to students at Hamilton Heights High School. Ryan White was searching for those that would be willing to accept him where others had not. Thankfully, that bridge was built and brought Ryan over to acceptance. The bridge brought new friends that would not judge, and it was a bridge that allowed Ryan to get his life back. I have a photo on my phone of Ryan with the following quote: "I'm just one of the kids, and all because students in Hamilton Heights listened to the facts, educated their parents and themselves, and believed in me. I didn't know it at the time, but Ryan was teaching me vital lessons on how to build a third bridge. A bridge that I believe will be the most important one this area has ever built." Which brings us to today. The third historic bridge this community needs to build needs to start now. It is a bridge that I believe will combine the best qualities from the first two bridges I spoke of, as well as bring out the best qualities of this community. The third bridge must be one that finally brings justice, equality, and unconditional love to our black brothers and sisters. A bridge that allows their suffering to become our suffering. A bridge that our black brothers and sisters' voices will be heard and their cries of injustice will travel in such a way that their white brothers and sisters begin to act and not be apathetic. That we get angry at stories of another man, woman, or child killed based solely on their black skin, and we're not annoyed because we've been taught to think, well, I'm glad it's not me. A bridge that teaches us selflessness instead of selfishness. And as Cherry Moran said, all lives will not matter, and it will only be true. It will only be true if we start standing up and saying Black Lives Matter first. I said earlier that Ryan taught me how to build this bridge, and he did. In that quote I read to you, he said 3 profound things about his situation that I believe are crucial in building this third bridge. Ryan said he was listened to, that people educated themselves, and that the community believed in him. Today, as we look over at the bridge over Morris, I want you to remember that love can build a bridge in this community, but only if we listen to our black brothers and sisters in this community, in Indiana, and in this nation. We then must educate ourselves. The burden should not be on our black brothers and sisters to educate us. Educate yourself. You can go to the library, you can get on the internet, you can read a book. We can actually learn what it's like to walk around in Cicero in America while being black. And we must believe that this love is essential and cannot be temporary. It must stay unconditional and strong to keep this third bridge from breaking again and again and again. And Lisa, it's been 40 years, and I'm sorry. Nick Smith is going to come up and lead us in a moment that was all his idea. Once again, another awesome young leader in our community.
Before we begin the moment of silence, I would like to say a couple words. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was arrested for allegedly using counterfeit bills to buy cigarettes. Once a complaint had been filed, 4 police officers got involved. One kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, while the other 3 officers watched in silence. During this time, Floyd could be heard saying, "I can't breathe," and he cried out for his mother. Even after Floyd became unresponsive, the officers continued to kneel on his neck, and even after a minute of paramedics arriving, he would not get off. George Floyd was killed by those police officers. It is important that you know and recognize that this happens. This happens across the nation all the time. This one protest is the start of this community recognizing that. Will you please listen to their names as I say them? Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Gardner, Troy Van Martin, Tamir Rice, and countless others. Those are only 5 of the hundreds of victims of police brutality throughout the entire
decades throughout the entire century. Now will you please take a knee with me for 8 minutes and 48 seconds to honor George Floyd. thank you for participating for that. This is one of the first steps to change, and that is to recognize the issue. The next step is to act on it. Do not let this be the final step to a new future. So now, to continue with those steps, will everybody who has a white sign and who is marching, please line up by the yellow poles over there so we can have our march across the bridge. We will now have a procession march up across the bridge with the flags, the USA and the Black Lives Matter flags, followed by those holding signs, a memorial of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and a group of others with messages letting those that see this procession on the bridge know that we are remembering all the lives that have been lost over these many years for simply being black, and we're pledging to ignore it no more. Each of us needs to reflect on all the times our black neighbors here and around the country have begged to be heard and seen, and what our next steps will be. What are you prepared to do so the begging can stop and that the hate and division can end today? I'm sure life has been rough on all that are here at some point, and you wanted to say enough. It's time to say enough to hate, enough to division, and enough to bigotry.
Across the desert with no shoes upon my